Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to our sneak peek of an exciting new feature of InterSystems Iris, Embedded Python. My name is Bob Kuszewski. I'm a product manager here at InterSystems, and today we're going to be giving you a glimpse into an upcoming feature of Iris. I'll start with a brief introduction of what is Embedded Python and why we think you're going to love it. I'll demo using Embedded Python from an ObjectScript developer's point of view. Now, this feature is not done, so I want to hear your feedback as to what we could do to make it better. I'll give you a short discussion at the end of where we are and what we envision you'll be able to do, and then invite you to join our Python interest group. So what is Embedded Python? What we've done is we've fused Python with ObjectScript in Iris. That is, both Python virtual machine and the ObjectScript virtual machine are running side by side inside the Iris process. You can invoke methods on Python objects from ObjectScript. You can invoke methods on ObjectScript objects from Python, and it all just works. Having both runtimes together allows for what I call toll-free bridging between these two worlds. You don't have to serialize one object to pass it from one language to the other. They're both there in memory together. So why Python? Why did we choose to extend Iris with Python? First and foremost, we picked Python for the ecosystem. There are thousands of high-quality, pre-built packages available today, both commercial and open source, especially in the areas of data science, IoT, bioinformatics, cloud, etc. The second reason is Python has been around since 1991, and it's grown in popularity since that time. It's a very popular language, in part because of its simplicity. It's very easy to learn and very easy to use. You can get courses for Python available cheap and free all over the world, whether they be online or at university. There are books, professional development courses. And the third major reason is that Python fits very well with Iris. It's designed to be embedded. It's been embedded into many applications over the years. Its runtime is very similar to the Iris runtime, which makes type compatibility very straightforward. While ObjectScript and Python have very different histories, they really have a lot in common. They're both object-oriented, dynamic, interpreted languages with full polymorphic dispatch. Both use reference counting for object lifetimes, and they're both written in C. This deep simpatico of the languages allows for even deep capabilities of each environment to just work. Things like profiling, that sort of thing, they work between the two. Really very interesting applications. So let's go on and see a demo of what Embedded Python will look like to you, an ObjectScript developer. Welcome to my demo of Embedded Python. Today we're going to see how to use Iris's new Embedded Python functionality from the ObjectScript developer's point of view. I'm running a preview of Iris 2020.4 on my machine, and I've started a regular Iris session. With Embedded Python, Python objects are first-class citizens. I'll be showing this throughout the demo. In fact, in Python, everything is an object, which makes it really easy to work with Python objects and Python libraries very naturally, very intuitively from within ObjectScript. So let's start by loading a Python module, shall we? So here, I am creating a variable called D, and I'm from #class %sys.python, which is a new library that we've added to support Python. All of your Python classes are going to look like %sys.python objects from within ObjectScript. It exports a method called import, and you give it the name of the Python module that you want to load. In this case, it's datetime. So let's take a look at what we saw coming back from from that. You see it's an object of type %sys.python, as I said. And then looking further, you see that it's a module of named datetime and where it was loaded up on my machine. So let's call some methods on that library, shall we? So set today gets d.date.today. So the datetime library provides an object called date that has a static method on it called today. And it returns, well, today. So if I then write today.iso format, you'll see that that object that you have here in ObjectScript, you can call methods on that just like any other methods, and it just works. So in this case, it's just writing today's timestamp out in ISO format. So all good. So let's try loading up another library. In this case, let's load up the built-ins module. So Python has some functions on it that are built in, that you don't have to preface, you don't have to load a module for them. Things like type and stir, and those sorts of things. You can gain access to those from ObjectScript by loading up a module called built-ins. So again, pretty straightforward. So you could do things like do b.print hello world. And what you'll see here is that standard out from Python is hooked up to the Iris console, so it looks just like standard out from from ObjectScript. Standard error, as you may imagine, goes to messages.log, again, just like you see from your ObjectScript on a day in and day out basis. And what's great about this is that you can load up any Python library. So there are thousands and thousands of really high quality libraries that are out there that are available for Python. So here I'm going to load up Numpy. Numpy is a very well-known library for scientific computing. It's really deep, it's really rich. It has a lot of mathematical functions in it. Things like linear algebra, those kinds of things are all stored in Numpy. In this case, I'm going to show you one from the financial algorithms section of Numpy called future value. Future value just lets you compute the future value of an investment if you have a certain APR for it. You have a time period, you have a starting investment on it, that sort of thing. So we can run that, and then let's print out the future value. Now, future value here is taking advantage of Numpy's 64-bit float object type. And so you see it gets your future value of that investment down to very, very small fractions of a penny, which I'm sure will make a big difference to all of us in our time of COVID. All right, but what if you wanted to write your own Python library? Not everything can be written in ObjectScript. Not everything can be written, it is a module that already exists in the world today. So let me show you how to do that. I wrote a little Python library myself earlier today called barchart.py, because I needed to create some charts from data that I have in Iris. In this case, I'm just using two libraries that are very common libraries from Python. There's the Pandas data frame, which for those of you who've used Python before, you've probably used Pandas data frame before, in that it is a very well-known way for keeping data, storing data, manipulating your data. Another one that's used a lot is the Matplotlib.pyplot. So this is one that's used for creating plots. Really great library. So what I've built is two functions, build graph and an example data frame. So build graph is the interesting part. You give it the name of a file that I want to create. In this case, it's an SVG for my bar chart. I give it a data frame. I give it the actual data that I want to work with, the name of the X series and the Y series from that data frame that I want to use for the bar chart. I also have an example data frame, so you can see what a data frame might look like in the real world. So let's import that library into Python, into Iris. And you see that it loads just like any other module that's out there. So you could write your own, and it's the same as a library that you've installed either through Iris or you've installed through pip, and it works. So here we have the data frame from the example data frame. And let's run my little create a bar chart function out of that data frame. And it did not return an error, so let's see that it actually created the bar chart. Ooh, and there is my bar chart example. So let's bring it up in Chrome so you can see it. And there's a very basic, very plain chart. There are a ton of great visual data manipulation tools that are available to work with data in Python. This is the most basic chart that you could possibly imagine. There are lots of great charts that are out there that you could, and tools for manipulating and visualizing your data that I encourage you to take a look at. We think that you're going to find all kinds of great uses for embedded Python. Embedded Python is especially valuable for applications where working close to the data is advantageous, like large data sets or chatty algorithms and that sort of thing. One of our developers was looking to expand synonym detection in INO. So prior to embedded Python, this would have been a really major undertaking. But with embedded Python, it was a very straightforward application because of the great ecosystem of libraries that are out there already for machine learning types of applications. In this case, he chose to use Word2Vec. So let me show you what he's done here. Second to bring up the code. And you'll see he wrote a Python module. It's more complete than and bigger than my little example that I put together, but it's a fairly straightforward Python example. And that you can load up just like all of the other modules that I've shown you today. Now, here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell it, hey, which trained model do we want to use? He's trained up a number of models. This one is a city synonym detector, but there are other ones. We had created one with a very large corpus, over 1 billion words. And using that, you can get synonyms for, say, the word heart attack or the phrase heart attack. And you'll get results like heart failure, cardiac event, and heart problems, along with the more usual synonyms that you would expect, like heart attacks or fatal heart attack. So this is a very small model for our demo today. It's trained up to detect city names. So let's give that a try. Let's type. So the words most similar to New York, based on our model. And let's see what it returned. Washington, San Francisco, and London. Again, all cities, so that's great. So one last thing that I want to show you today, and that's the quoting of Python function names. So While Python and ObjectScript have very similar feature set, Python is somewhat more permissive in what characters can be used in function names. One common technique is in Python is the so-called Dunder methods. So these are ones that begin and end with 2 underscores. We can work around this difference between the 2 languages in Iris because Iris allows property names and function names that contain illegal characters to be quoted. So I can do things like this. Write word list dot quote underscore underscore get item. And that gets me the second element in the list, or the 1th element in the list. Here's the 0th element in the list. So now we've seen embedded Python. We've seen embedded Python's ability to load Python modules, to call Python methods and functions, to pass data back and forth between Python and ObjectScript, to create our own Python modules from ObjectScript. There's a lot that we're still working on with embedded Python, but I know you can tell this. I'm really excited about embedded Python and what you'll be able to do with it. And I'm sure you will find great opportunities to make use of this from your applications. Thank you. Wasn't that great? Very interesting demo. Integrated Python is being used today in our new integrated ML feature. You've probably heard of it. Half of the Virtual Summit is all about integrated ML, and that's because it's awesome. We're now working on adding integrated Python across the Iris ecosystem. On the list here, you'll see a number of areas that we've thought of that we would like to see Python brought on board. I have another session later in the week that is about using SQL and having all the code-bearing structures of SQL be able to use Python and not just ObjectScript. You can also use Python routines, so write no ObjectScript if you want to. Maybe you want to take an ObjectScript class and have some of the methods in ObjectScript and some of them written in Python. We're hoping to be able to do that as well. And then, of course, interoperability. What a great use of Python. You'll be able to build business services, business processes, all of the parts of interoperability you'll be able to do with Python. So some of the things that I want you to take away from this, right, is that embedded Python gives you access to thousands and thousands of great packages that are already built, designed, documented. You won't have to rewrite everything in ObjectScript to think about how do I bring that into my Iris application. Simplicity. You'll be able to have your ObjectScript work directly with your Python, and they'll be able to pass objects back and forth very successfully and very easily. Now, I know everyone wants to know, when is this going to be released? How do I get my hands on it? Well, the good news is we'll be releasing it in phases over the next year or so. There's a preview of it available in 2020.4. My demo was based on it. Full support for a number of other use cases will be available starting in 2021.1, and then more functionality will be laid out through the course of the year. You can also attend our session DE008, which is all about embedding Python in SQL, writing your stored procedures in Python, user-defined functions, all of those code-bearing things, and how that is going to work. If you'd like to get in touch with me, my name is Bob Kruszewski. There's my email address up on the screen. Feel free to reach out with whatever questions that you might have. And thank you, and I hope you're having a great summit.